going forward. Just basically looking at how can leagues, sponsors, and athletes adapt to meet the new age in competitive arenas, both real and virtual. Because as we know, because of this wonderful pandemic, a lot of things have gone virtual, and a lot of sports will literally put on standstill during this year. So we want to take a look at all the global trends and how that can be applied in the African context, and how leagues, teams, and athletes can utilize data to get sponsorship dollars. So that's another thing. We're going to look at sponsorship, and I've got a wonderful co-host with me today. I have Fungai, and Fungai is an amazing asset in the industry. He is working with a Swiss-based company called Infront Sports as head of marketing and communication. So you're going to hear a lot from him, especially when he's interacting with the wonderful panel we have today. And to just start us off, to kick us off for the day, we have Matt Gamby, and he is based in London. He's the global director of partnerships at Sportsquake, and they handle a big sponsorship portfolio in the La Liga and English Premiership. So he's going to there's definitely going to be a lot to pick at when you're thinking of his industry. And then we're also going to be listening to, during this session, Matilda Nyati, who is an experienced corporate marketing executive, and she was in charge of an annual $1 million sports sponsorship portfolio, which has served rugby, tennis, cricket, and hockey. So just get your questions and your comments and anything ready for us, and we will raise them to the panel. But I will hand over to Matt Gamby and Matilda.
Hi everyone, lovely to meet you. And Rufara, thanks for the introduction. As Rufara mentioned, I work at a company called Sportquake. We're a sport marketing agency based in London, really specialising in bringing brands of all natures into the sports space. And as Rufara mentioned, a lot of the work has been based within football, European football. We've worked with the likes of some of the big clubs in European football, including the likes of Barcelona, Juventus, PSG, to Manchester Cities of the world, and also with some of the top talent like Cristiano Ronaldo, Iniesta, and world-class footballers like that. But yeah, no, really excited to hear more from you guys and answer any questions that you may have about the European landscape and how it can be, I suppose, replicated, or any learnings that can be replicated in the African market.
Okay, over to you, Matilda.
Thanks, Rufaro. Hi, everyone. I'm Matilda Nyati. I'm based in Harare in Zimbabwe, and I'm the group executive for marketing and corporate affairs for CBZ Holdings, which is one of the leading financial institutions in the country. I have been in this industry for the past 19 years as a strategic marketer, working myself up. And yeah, I've basically been in sports marketing for a couple of years now, partnering a number of institutions, and one of the major ones being Kairos Sport. The main areas that we focused on from a corporate point of view has been in developmental sport, just focusing on the grassroots, focusing on the marginalized market, be it in rugby, in cricket, and at some point in the Premier League of Zimbabwe as well through CBZ, that's soccer. So yeah, I've been in the corporate world for 19 years, but it's seen huge value in sports marketing, and really excited to be here and look forward to hearing from you guys.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Matt and Matilda. At this point, I will hand over to Fungai, who I know has some burning questions for both of you, and that will definitely get the ball rolling for us. Fungai?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rufar, and good day to everybody from wherever you're listening from. It's great to have you on the virtual event. I think, as Rufar already mentioned, it's quite a great pairing that we have of Matt and Matilda, and I think it brings to the fore, the situation what we see today, where on one hand you've got great sports marketing agencies that are matching brands to sports properties, and on the other hand, we have Matilda who's representing a typical brand that is actually venturing into sports sponsorship. I guess, Matt, you mentioned earlier on that you're working in Syria, you're working with La Liga, and so forth. I mean, in your view, what is actually determining the value of sports sponsorship today in terms of properties?
Yeah, I think really when we talk about sponsorship value, I think probably best to look at it as a twofold situation. So really you have, what's the value for the rights holder, the football club, the football league, what's the value for them? But then also what's the value for the brand in entering such partnership? So I think when you look at, where we are at the moment with the pandemic, obviously that's hugely impacted balance sheets, financial results for some of the biggest rights holders across the globe. So I think in terms of the current situation and where the value is being driven is really what they can do, what clubs and brands can do more of, given the situation. Obviously, with no fans in the stadium, viewership numbers on TV are higher than they've ever been. People have started utilizing digital channels a lot more, and what you'll find is that the properties that have become the hottest for brands to partner with are the ones that are really digitally forward. So, when you look at the likes of football as a sport in general, it's for years, it's been focused on the digital aspect of things. And that's where I think now most brands are now live in the digital era. So they're really starting to see the value from that. But I think, where the value is driven for the rights holders is really ultimately the rights they offer to the brand. But it also has an economy of itself. It's still based on supply and demand, depending on which sector or which asset you're looking for from a club or from a rights holder. It's all about supply and demand in terms of what the end value would be. But I think for a brand, the value is really driven by, what can this rights holder offer that can help me reach my KPIs for both brand, marketing, and sales.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, you touched on a very interesting point there in terms of what brands are looking for. I think maybe I bring in Matilda here. When we're discussing in the icebreaker earlier on, you mentioned how Kairos has been able to give you sort of like hand holding over the last couple of years or so. But when you actually went into sports sponsorship, what exactly were you looking for as a brand? What were you looking to achieve from your side?
Thanks, Funga. So as a brand, we're looking for quite a number of KPIs from partnering, sports, and one of them is just brand awareness. We're always looking for channels, for avenues that we can get the brand known to current markets, to new markets, the brand to be appreciated in terms of what it stands for, what its offerings are. And, that's one of the main, reasons why really we would get into sport. And obviously, we want to create a perception for our brand. We want to, create a good perception in terms of what it is that we're offering. We're looking at providing content for our product solutions. And one of the other areas is just to have direct access to a captive audience. Sports basically is really at the fore in any country. Mm-hmm. And that audience is always there, regardless of whether you're getting into soccer, into cricket or rugby. And tapping into that, having that direct access into that market is a huge thing for brand for brand owners and for marketers, and to create conversations around our brand, and ultimately to have lead generation, which then would lead to conversions and a downright sale for us. So those are the main reasons why really a brand a manager or a marketer would get into sports marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. I think you touched on something which really resonates with me as a marketer like yourself, which is at the end of the day, we have a long list of things that we want to achieve. But then coming back to you, Matt, I mean, yes, you've secured the sponsorship, with a brand, whether it's CBZ or whomever. How do you ensure that the properties then deliver on these expectations from the brand perspective?
Yeah, I think any with a rights holder or team, or they really need to get under the skin of the brand that they're working with. So if it is like a CBZ coming in, the rights holder needs to understand what are they looking to achieve. They've obviously got these suite of rights as part of the sponsorship deal. How can we maximize each individual right to deliver the brand's goals and the brand's KPIs? And if they get under the skin and really understand the brand, it's it's the perfect recipe for something to go long term rather than it being a short term partnership. If you can tick the boxes of the different KPIs that you can reach or that you can hit for the brand by understanding what they're looking to do and what the sponsorship means to them, I think that's the ultimate way to really get these partnerships working longer term.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you mentioned at the beginning the whole COVID impact on sports. Now, when I look at Africa, for example, the penetration of technology and the emerging digital technologies is not been at the same pace as the rest of Europe. And despite Africa being a mobile first continent, but nevertheless they are still lagging behind. So when it comes then to pricing, properties where you need to do digital activation, how then do you bridge the gap for brands which are in Africa?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think probably when you look at it, obviously in terms of the way that Europe has been able to adapt, and if I take the example of football in particular, everything has almost moved digitally. And I think when you look at the domestic sport in Africa, it's going to be important for the clubs to begin to adapt into the digital culture more and taking learnings from how the European side of it has done. I think for European brands, Africa is still a very big market for them, and a number of brands that we work with are looking to target the continent. So there is definitely opportunity to see more brands from Europe enter into the sports space in Africa, but I think there needs to be a lot more education for brands into the power of sport in Africa and what it can deliver. But I also think that there will be a time where everyone starts to move into this digital era, and the rights holders in Africa will begin to see an influx of brands come in. So I think the outlook looks quite positive, although the current situation is difficult.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think obviously I myself working in digital, I know it's been one of the main outlets, both on the property side and both on the brand side. And the topic that has been coming up a lot is then how do you start quantifying and measuring that ROI when you factor in digital? And maybe I come back to you, Matilda. You've been on a very long path when it came to sports sponsorship, and I can assume your approach to ROI has differed along the years. At what point are you at the moment? I mean, how do you measure the ROI from sports sponsorship from your side?
Thanks, Fungai. So, obviously we're in business and we are looking at, commercial return on investment as well. So, downright to that, how many sales have we managed to convert, be it at these sports events themselves or, when we're pushing the content online. So that's one area that, we've had to just look at measuring the return on investment in that way, but also looking at, the reputation of the organization, because you'll find that consumers want to associate sponsors with the event that or that they particularly like, and by that association we create a PR story out of it, and we create we actually be able to promote our reputation as an organization. And also just how unique the sponsorship is very important to us. Is it something that will attract a large audience to follow it? Does it have a lot of controversies? associated with it? How professional are the administrators themselves who are managing? So all those, key indicators for us to determine whether we want to or we should be, partnering this particular sports property.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And I mean, just coming back to a couple of points that the both of you raised, and I think maybe I can bring you both on this topic, starting with Matt. I mean, we've already touched on digital as one of the main trends that is emerging out of the COVID situation. And from our side, what we're seeing is the topic of responsible sponsoring. And I think you have some elements of that, Matilda, that you mentioned, that you're going in the rural areas with grassroots initiatives, etc. And what we've noticed in Europe, where some athletes who are directly financed by sports sponsorship have not been able to do any events this year due to cancellations, but we've found brands continued throughout the whole pandemic actually paying them a living salary, etc. Now, coming back to you, Matt, I mean, has this topic come up among some of your properties? And if so, how have they approached the whole responsible sponsorship aspect?
Yeah, I think as part of every contract that we work on now, CSR is always a portion within that contract in terms of the rights, and I think it's so important for a brand to understand community. And that's if you're working with any sports club, the local community to pretty much the sport club is at the heart of the community. So it's really important for brands to begin to engage and work with the local community, local schools, local charities to really cement the brand, but also some goodwill into you understand what this club stands for or what this property stands for. I think that's what's really important, because I think your first touch point as a sponsor is fans of the club. So you really need to build a good rapport with the fans in order as the first step to your sponsorship to be successful.
Yeah. And I think for you, Matilda, I mean, how does this affected how CBZ is approaching sponsorship in the pandemic? I mean, does this affect your grassroots initiatives? Have you had to pull back? And if so, I mean, how do you plan on coming back into it?
Certainly, Funga, we've faced challenges, obviously, because of of COVID and the fact that we couldn't get out there, especially in the communities that we sponsor sport. But definitely, what we've done is to keep the engagements, live, especially on our social media channels. And in one particular area, we're not necessarily in CBZ, but with one property we had in the previous, engagement, was just to ensure that the especially with development sports, that the youth, the kids are kept engaged in their community, so that they may not necessarily need to travel and spend time and money and expose themselves, but actually be very visible in the communities, be seen to be doing community work. And that has been huge, because the parents, the adults actually see this taking place and value the kids going out for sport, but more importantly seeing them doing work in the community. So it's been affected, obviously, but we keep the spirit there and just make sure that in their communities they're having a difference there.
Exactly. I mean, Rufaro, do you want to come in with something here before I continue with Matilda and Matt?
I do, actually. I was intently listening, and I just wanted to find out from them, because obviously one of the major things that creeps in, obviously, when it comes to sponsorships or anything of the sort, is corruption. And how do we curb that? Like, because in our industry, we found situations where, sometimes people, and this is on an African, on a European scale, there's always that room and space. But especially as emerging organizations trying, and there's a lot coming out here too, and some are not necessarily always legit, but how do we curb that and look when it comes to approaching institutions like yours? How do we look or appear the most integrity based in terms of what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go, especially in terms of the African continent, where, for instance, one thing that I've noticed is there's not a lot of digital exposure as much as we are moving in that age, so that, you know, certain things can come quicker to the fore. So yeah, that's just kind of my long-ended question to both of you. I don't know who wants to start.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, so I'll go very briefly. Thanks, Rufaro. That's a huge risk for us, particularly I'm talking about, you know, corporates who want to get into sport marketing or who are in sports marketing, just to have that professional handling of this particular sponsorship property. One of the key you know, initiatives that we've seen that really helps a lot is being able to partner audit firms or auditing firms to come on board on the particular sponsorship property, you know, and they've helped a lot, you know, in one particular property I'm referring to, which was, I think, Tech Rugby, where, you know, we actually had the reports coming through, where I'm a marketer, you know, and so obviously I've got my own protocol internally to follow. And one of the things that the finance director wants to look at is return on investment, and have the funds been actually used for what they were intended for. And the audit reports have been a huge game changer in terms of, you know, accountability, and also just doing a lot of due diligence on the partners that we, you know, bring on board, just to see, you know, their credibility in the market and work that they've done before. That's also huge to know, you know, who to partner with. But, you know, you can't completely take it away. But I think those two main, you know, initiatives have really helped us to get into these partnerships and feel like, you know, we are on the same page when it comes to just integrity.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I'd really echo what Matilda mentioned there. I think we're now with all types of sponsorships now. There's two-way due diligence process. It will be the rights holder or the property doing due diligence on the brand, and it'll be the brand doing due diligence on the property that they go into, and that is a really essential part of the process, because, you know, there obviously have been some stories where certain sponsorships haven't worked out because, you know, that due diligence hadn't taken place. But now, I mean, specifically in the last 3 to 4 years, I've personally seen a big increase in that.
Okay, thank you for that. I think both of you have adequately answered my question. That was it for now. Fungai, you can go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Fungai. Okay. Yeah, we can hear you now. Okay, no more. We can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
While Matilda and Matt were
go
speaking,
ahead.
my battery was running low on the other headset, so I had to switch it. So once you connect the cable, it cuts your hands free out. But anyway, I had a backup especially for this reason. I was just saying, I think, you know, the topic of compliance is one where our industry has had to do a lot of cleaning up over the last few years. And you know, you only need to, you know, type in sport and compliance, and you see a lot of stories coming up. And I will say, you know, from Infrance perspective, it's something that we as a company are taking very seriously. We've put in place, you know, major compliance processes in place, and also recently released a whistleblower channel for this particular reason. So I think it's something that, as an industry, we continue to take seriously. And even though there is a little bit more to be done, I think, in my opinion, but nevertheless, we do take it seriously for sure. And then just to come back quickly to some of the points that came up in that discussion, I think one of the main news that came out of Zimbabwe last week was the issuance of new television licenses. And, you know, I was in a webinar yesterday with my colleagues from Germany, and, you know, one of them was talking about the death of the TV star. And, you know, you see a lot of these channels which are being licensed almost every other day. But at the same time, we talk of the death of the TV stars. Now, coming back to you, perhaps Matt first, on what trends are we seeing in terms of the consumption of media between both television and obviously the digital platforms themselves? Because we all know TV is not dead, it continues to be a primary channel, but how do you create that crossover between the two and continuously remain connected?
Yeah, I think that actually raises another point in sport, Fungi, which is really the streamers and the people that legally stream football. Premier League specifically is that's a big market in terms of how people still stay connected without needing to go through paywalls and things like that the likes of Sky have in place. And we obviously had a huge case of that in the UK where during the pandemic at the start, all Premier League fixtures were shown live on TV in England, and then when we went back into lockdown again, and obviously there's been no fans there since, they started charging £15 per fixture, only on a specific number of fixtures each week. But the subscriptions to watch those games were tiny. And obviously there was a huge revolt from fans in terms of paying £15 to watch specific games, and ultimately Sky ended up losing a fair chunk of money because people weren't actually paying to watch the games anymore. So I think there is a relationship that needs to be fixed, and I don't just think it's here in the UK. I think it's globally, between TV channels and fans in terms of accessibility to sport. Because I think people, everyone loves to watch professional sport, or most people do, in terms of the thrill that it brings. But that relationship between TV and sports fans is fractious, I think, especially here in the UK. But I've also seen that in other European countries and wider. But I think once you get out of TV, I think the consumption on other digital channels, social media, and things like that, and the way that clubs and sponsors even are trying to bring the fans closer to the clubs, to their favorite players and things like that, has been really encouraging throughout the pandemic. But I think there's been issues in other channels.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the main aspects of the change here is also that the consumption behaviors, in particular of what they call the Gen C. So these are people who are consuming media, in particular on digital platforms. But when I look at Zimbabwe, like many African countries, the population of young people, or those classed as youths, is about 60%. And if I look at you, Matilda, on this question, you mentioned content at the beginning of our discussion. That is something that is very important to a brand like yourselves. And now, when you have to consider that there is a jump between television, sometimes laptop, sometimes iPad. What sort of content, in your opinion, do you believe the properties can bring and help you reach this target audience that is sometimes rather very fickle in how they consume content?
Thanks, Fungai. So yeah, content is definitely a big thing, and it needs to be relevant, and it needs to resonate with whichever audience that you targeting it at. And you mentioned the youth here. They want stuff that's new. They want stuff that's current, so they don't want to watch games that have been played, last night or a week ago, which is one of the biggest challenges that, we have locally. And I think it could be due to the cost of broadcasting, live games and that sort of thing. So you did mention the new TV stations, and I had a meeting with one of the companies that has been awarded this license, and I was basically saying to them that I hope that the content will be great and will attract this market to television, because content is really a big challenge. That's why they kind of move to digital a lot more, because it's more current, it's relevant, it resonates with whatever it is that they're going through in their lifestyles. But also affordability is quite key. For them, if we look at digital, data is obviously quite a big thing in Zim, in Africa, I would assume as well. So zero-based where possible, but just make it affordable and make sure that the content is relevant, and you will find the followers just coming through because it pulls.
Yeah,
pulls
and you mentioned a very interesting point there, regarding that the young people want the latest things, and I think out of that we've seen the rise of platforms, as they call them. I mean, you have platforms like Twitch, which were unknown just a few years back, but they're driving these kind of behaviors, alongside your usual Instagram and Facebook. One point that comes to mind for me when you look at this, the rise of platforms, is that of community. And you touched on the point at the beginning on how you want to access communities. Now, if someone like Matt, were to come to you offering you a property and you say, okay, look, we want to access communities, what would you have in mind in terms of reaching a broader community? And at what point is a community useful to CBZ, for example?
So in looking at CBZ in particular, we are a universal financial institution, and our segments cut across demographically. So we would look for a sponsorship property that relates to our business values, in terms of offering financial solutions to all of Zimbabwe, and a property that will touch the masses wherever they are. So it has to get into places where people don't normally get sports being either whether it's on TV or digitally. So we're looking at something that can allow the man on the street to be able to access it. And I think a lot of companies share the same mentality, because obviously sport has been quite elitist to a large extent, because of the expenses involved. So we look at that financial inclusion as a financial institution. So we also want sport inclusion. We want to make sure that the rural folk are able to access it. We want to make sure that the kids in public schools are able to access it. So that's, for me, is a huge attraction, because it also just relates to my business strategy. It relates to our corporate strategy and how we want to get basically to every corner in Zimbabwe.
Exactly. And I mean, Matt, then from your side, what would be the ideal strategies to approach community engagement as part of sports sponsorship from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks. And I think really to echo what Matilda said there, alignment is the most important thing. So aligning, corporate values with the values of the property you're sponsoring is so essential, because it's all about, by engaging that community, you're really engaging them based on your corporate values and the alignment between their favorite team or their favorite sport. So that's really, I think the best first step in terms of engaging community is really alignment of values. And then obviously outside of that, there are so many different initiatives that the brands have utilized in terms of engaging the community, and ultimately it is bound to providing more access to sport, which is a great thing.
I mean, we had a very interesting example recently with one of our properties, which is running event, and we had a brand that approached us, wanted to get involved with that property. And the usual I've seen in Zimbabwe, I think Old Mutual, your previous employer, Matilda, is very much at the forefront of promoting things like mass participation events, running, etc. I think CBZ is probably involved in that as well. And most brands want activation on the day, give free products, etc. And it was quite interesting to hear from this brand. They said, look, we are a nutrition brand, and for us, giving free products on the day is not something that we're actually interested in. We're interested in more the community approach. And for them, they want to be able to be part of the process from the very, very first thought of the events that could be 3-6 months away, and have that community of participants access their product. It could be that someone doesn't like the product, and then on the day, you try and force that product on them, and they don't want it. So I think the whole community aspect is one which I believe is very beneficial on both sides, from a property perspective, that you get the right brand coming on board, but from a brand perspective, you also get really at the core of what makes an event. Communities make events, and the whole spirit around communities is what drives that event. And then maybe I don't know, we've got a bit of a time that we need to keep here, Rufaro. I'll just come back to one aspect that we touched on at the very beginning, which is esports. I think you mentioned quite a lot, Matt, and can you give some insights into trends that you believe are spilling over in esports towards Africa, as well as maybe Matilda after that? Is this something that CBZ is thinking about in terms of sponsorship within esports?
Yeah, I think esports has been obviously it's been growing for a period of time now, probably over the last couple of years. But the one thing we did see is that in the absence of live sport during the pandemic, esports lived on, and what it's created in terms of, as you mentioned, Fungi, in terms of the new platforms. Twitch is now a huge consumable platform, which also presents a big opportunity to brands. Similarly, as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram do, Twitch is now that next level in terms of engaging that gaming community, and that audience is a younger audience. And I think esports is something that's only going to grow. And I think what we're seeing is it's exciting, because you're seeing big blue chip brands starting to engage in esports that probably don't necessarily target their traditional demographic. You've got the likes of Mercedes-Benz engaging in sports sponsorship, DHL engaging in esports sponsorship. These are brands that don't typically appeal to younger people, but they're engaging in it, and it's I think it's a really exciting community to look at. And I think we're involved in it. We actually launched an esport division of our company because we've seen the growth and the trends in it. And although it's a really complex ecosystem, it really is, because it's truly global now in terms of the different leagues that are operating. And I'm sure you know all about that, Fungi.
Exactly.
Different leagues, different regions, continents. It's a very complex ecosystem. But I think once it's understood, it will become a powerhouse property in sponsorship for sure.
Mm-hmm. And from your side, Matilda?
Yeah, Fungi. So not as much as Europe esports in terms of it being in Zim, but definitely it would be the way to go. I remember when we were planning our marathon this year, and the good thing is we had it on the 8th of March, and probably 2 weeks later we all went into lockdown.
Yeah.
So we were able to have the 2,000 runners coming out, thankfully, for our marathon. But if we hadn't been able to do that, definitely would have had a virtual marathon of some sort, just to make sure that we keep up the goals regarding that marathon, to improve fitness levels of our market. One of the properties that we also did was just to partner, a fitness trainer, and just get content on our online channels where, at a specific hour of the day, they were just taking fitness lessons for the public. So whilst we haven't gotten into it quite big, but it's certainly, a huge potential for us, an opportunity for us to get into it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, one thing, as you mentioned, COVID has spanned innovation, both from a property perspective and also from a brand perspective. We worked recently with a sponsor, who is a tire manufacturer. And for them, they're moving away from traditional sports sponsorship because of any possible disruption in the future. But what we saw, with esports and things like fitness, which people didn't think can actually go virtual, went virtual. And most of the sponsors quickly shifted to that platform that was still going. We had a Tour de Suisse, basically the second, biggest cycling event after, in our opinion, Tour de France. And within a couple of weeks, there was a virtual event called Digital Swiss 5, which was created. And you saw all those brands which had committed to the actual physical event swiftly moving onto digital and being able to continuously reach out to the fans. I think we had a breaking record in terms of television views as well as online views of that event. And then just maybe before I bring Rufaro back in, any last thoughts from your side, Matt? And then we come back to Matilda. Anything that you want to share, perhaps, the top tips in terms of trends that you believe can be adaptable in Africa when it comes to sports sponsorship from your side. And likewise, Matilda, if there are guys who are from a brand side listening in, what would be your advice in terms of approaching sports sponsorship from a brand perspective? What should they look out for, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Fungai. I mentioned it in the icebreaker, and the thing for me is that where everything that's happened this year should really look that it presents an opportunity. And I think that, specifically I suppose in the sport market globally, the property holder, the rights holders really need to start being flexible and, being able to figure out different solutions in order for brands to feel safe in entering the sports space while there's still a lot of disruption going on. And I think it's for the brands to, I suppose, take a bit of time, understand what the offering is. And I think if there's good alignment, I think this is really an important time for brands to keep their support in sport. And it can almost be an opportunity where you maybe getting more eyeballs than you ever have on your sponsorship property because of the way that the broadcast trends, the viewership numbers are heading at the moment. I think all in all, there's definitely a lot of I think there's a lot of positives to take from the situation. I think that given again the impact of COVID could even be a positive that it provides a new price point, because there have been a lot of discounts in the in the space. It probably presents a good opportunity for brands that maybe haven't had the opportunity to enter sport because of the high pricing, to re-enter the sport now, and that again is something that I think should be looked at as a good thing, because you get more dynamic, more new economy brands entering the space rather than, I suppose, the traditional brands that we're all used to, which heavily center around gambling and things like that. It'd be really, I think it's really a great opportunity to see some new economy brands enter the space.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Thanks, Fungai. So yeah, I think if there are any brand managers there or marketers out there, just to say there's huge opportunity in sports marketing, and there's really some great return on investment. You can literally take quite a number of KPIs that you will get in the positive. And looking at the Zim market, it's actually quite ripe. There's developmental sport that you could take up. There's the leagues, the provincial, and also just at national level. So there's space for everyone, really, at the end of it all. Not just to look and say CBZ is in sport, or All Mutual is in sport, or Stanbic is in sport. I can't get into it. There's so much that that is there for everyone. And most importantly, I think it's just to see how it helps us become responsible businesses. Building sport is building nations, and giving an opportunity to those that would not have had that opportunity. So, and at the end of the day, you get your brand equity as well. So huge opportunity for all of us. Just pick a sport, run with it, and you'll see how beneficial it is to the brand and to the community.
Excellent piece of advice there, Matilda. Thanks. Rufaro, I'll bring you in at this point.
Okay, thanks, Fungai. Wow, guys, I'm in awe of just the feedback that you guys have been giving, because it's so necessary and pertinent in terms of currently what we're going through, and obviously for planning forward, because there will definitely be need to plan ahead, because Corona won't be with us forever. At least that's the hope. But yeah, very, very priceless times of advice and just feedback, like I said. And now, while we soak it all in, we're just going to take a 2-minute break before we bring in our next panel. But thank you so much, Matt, Gamby, and thank you, Matilda, for your time. I mean, you guys are talking to people who are all over the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. So your time really means a lot to us, and I am just really appreciative of just what you've given us for this session. And I personally, I was actually taking notes, and I know that this is definitely going to be beneficial for a lot of people who are trying to get into this industry, who are in this industry, or people who just want to know what this means to be in the sports sector and all the things that are happening. So thank you very much for that. So we're just going to take
a quick one.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Was there any questions coming in from any audience before our panelists leave?
I hadn't. Let me check. I hadn't.
Hey guys, yeah.
Okay, so there is one here from Tawanda Chiwira on Facebook. Thank you for reminding me about that. And he's asking, there seems to be a disconnect between high school and club level in Zimbabwe. Are there any brands taking advantage of this? Okay, I think that would be a question maybe for the next section, but so far that's the only question. I don't know if any have come in from Kisset's side. No, okay. So yeah, no questions yet.
Yeah, I think Matilda touched a little bit on that point, if I may add. I think it was very good advice that she gave from my point of view. I mean, I'm obviously not on the ground in Zimbabwe, but this is something that we've come across on our side from an international perspective. We've been working with COSAFA, for example, and COSAFA has, as you know, at the moment, under 20s and under 17s events going on, and their whole strategy is to try and reach really the grassroots with football. And last year, COSAFA was the only African region to send, I think, 3 or 4 teams to the Africa Cup of Nations last time. And this was, again, through the fact that they hold these events pretty much every year to make sure that the younger people have a platform. And then if you go back to what I'm sure it was Munya or Nyasha who mentioned the whole initiatives from rural areas and bringing the kids to the platform, eventually they end up on this platform. Now, from a brand perspective, they wanted us to help them look for brands to sponsor, the lower events. And one of the things that we're bringing to them was that, look, there is a greater prospect of you actually being listened to because you're really reaching to the core of who the people who love the sports are at. And I think if you're a brand, listening, I would say, forget about COVID, because what we've seen from our side is that strong brands enjoy quicker recoveries. If you continue investing in sponsorship, invest in that share of the voice, no matter where it is. Downturns tend to drive that long-term profitability, in my opinion. And I think it echoes what Matilda also said.
Thanks for that, Fungai. Thanks. Yeah, I think that answers that question slightly, but I'm sure even as we go in deeper into the next sessions, that question will definitely be answered as well. So yeah, feel free, guys. Don't leave with any comments or questions that you feel need to be answered, especially by these two. So yeah, before we're going to
yeah. Can you see them?
Yeah, we can see you.
No, can you see the questions? There's a couple more questions.
There's a couple more. Let me go.
There's a question from Clive. Clive. There were Facebook ones, are they?
Yeah, there's one Facebook one and one more.
From Tawanda. Yeah, also esports. How can a company take advantage where data is at a premium? I mean, do you want to chime in on that one first, Matt? And I'm happy to also chime in after you.
Yeah, I think with esports, obviously being in its I suppose relatively its infancy compared to other mainstream sports, I think what you'll find, and particularly from my experience, and Funga, I'm not sure about yours, but in terms of esports, but the data that the esports teams hold is actually quite extensive, and we've worked through, and because everything's digital, they're able to go to quite a granular level in terms of the data that they can provide with brands. So hopefully it can begin to provide a bit of comfort for brands looking to enter into the space. But I think in general with esports, as well as the data being important, it's also understanding the ecosystem, because it's quite complex and something that's, I suppose, important to understand before taking the step into investing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you took a more brand angle, but maybe if I can try and have a jab at a way that I believe I understand the question from Tawanda. Now, I know data is quite expensive in most African countries. More so in Zimbabwe, from what I normally see people talking about on Twitter. But I think this is an opportunity for brands which up and coming that don't have a massive footprint across Africa. Example out of the top of my head would be Liquid Telecom, for example. Can you create data packages that are only attractive, for gamers, for example? They've done that for the likes of the WhatsApp bundles, the Facebook or whatever Twitter bundles. I'm sure you can do the same for bundles that are focused more for gamers. But more importantly, I believe properties alongside brands can build their own ecosystem for esports that is just targeted at Africa, where you can participate with much lower bandwidth, much lower data consumption. And I think this is an opportunity now to try and test that. I mean, on our side, we launched a game with a partner called Valorant a couple of weeks ago. And in terms of uptake, it has received, I think, over 94% of people who participated in the beta version said that they will go on to take up actually playing the game. And over 10 hours a week are being spent on this new game. And this game was developed as a result of COVID. So it's a perfect time to enter gaming from a brand perspective. If you're a telecoms brand and you want to leverage that to be able to provide local solutions from a data point of view and actually reach fans who then want to play and then connect with the brands who then want to sponsor on that platform. I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thanks, Fungai and Matt. I hope it does too. There's one more. Actually, a couple. Okay, I'll take, I think, two more questions and then we take that break. But it says from Clive, he says, what sort of strategies can sport organizations in Zimbabwe use to keep their fans engaged? Being in Zim, I feel that fan engagement is one area sport organizations are lacking. Hence, they struggle to get sponsors because attendance is low. And I guess we can get into the next one after that. Okay, the next one would be, how are the local teleco companies engaging in getting sports to wider viewers?
Okay, so I mean, so with the first one, what sort of strategies can sport organizations in Zimbabwe use to keep fans engaged? So being in Zimbabwe, I feel fan engagement is one area sports organizations are lacking, hence they struggle to get sponsorship. I think this connects again to the whole data point as one, but the second one for me is more around content. One thing that has emerged in particular from the COVID is the fact that people are becoming more, I don't want to say fickle, but they're scrutinizing more content that is coming from properties, in that they want content that talks to them. Now, as people, we're normally used to adverts where it's a broad message and we don't tend to relate to it. But then one of the new areas that the COVID has opened is the whole personalization aspect. So I can move from one device to another and actually have content that speaks to me, as Matilda mentioned. So once I get content that speaks to me as a prospect, I'm going to engage with it. I mean, I don't know what Matt and Matilda think about this, but please feel free to chime in.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, certainly, content needs to resonate with the audience, and that alone is a huge pull factor to to the particular channel. And so besides that, one of the key fan engagement issues regarding events themselves, they need to be affordable in the country. I know we had one rugby tournament where it was priced quite highly, and we found that not everyone could actually afford to come out. And when we reduced the pricing for that, we had a lot more coming through, and people were excited. And obviously just engaging them, advertising and making them aware of these events, so that they know in time, they're safe, and they're able to actually participate. So this is just the face-to-face if it's possible. But one of the things that we're also trying to do is just to zero rate the content itself, so that it's affordable to the masses, and they can access it quite easily. But it's always a huge challenge, just getting the fans engaged. But when the content is right, it will pull the fans to the channel.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'll completely agree. I think if attendance numbers are low at certain events, the key point is to try and make it as accessible and understand the barriers, then try and make it as accessible to as many people in the community as possible. I think that's pretty essential. Yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. And then as you mentioned, Funga, content that brings fans closer to the events is the second part, that is also something that will bring them closer and get them more engaged in the event or the club.
Cool, excellent. Just questions of time. I think Rufaro, maybe I'll just ask this one question. I think it's probably relevant from what we've discussed, and then maybe we can take a break after this. So Matilda,
okay.
which sports have given your brand a tangible ROI?
That's a trick question, Funga.
I always try to stay away from this question, even on my side as well. But here we go.
Yeah.
It's here. We have to skin it now.
Yeah. I would not necessarily, pick a particular sport, whether it's soccer or rugby or cricket, but I would say development sport for us has given us some huge return on investment, because it has aligned with our financial inclusion strategy. So maybe not necessarily one particular sport, but the level, of the sport itself, which is at development level, has had huge returns for us, both financially and just brand equity, and, just positioning the reputation of the organization.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you very much, guys, for your questions. I'll switch over to Rufaro to lead us into the break.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for your questions. The more the merrier for us, and obviously let's pick all the information and pick the brains that are present with us as much as we can. So guys, again, I just want to share how appreciative and how thankful I am for you guys' this contribution, and just your sharing your wealth of knowledge in this industry. So yeah, we are going to go on a break. Please don't leave yet. We are just taking a slight break for 2 minutes, and we will be back. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Cause I know that you're just about your door. I'll be your heart to shine. Cause I know that you're making on your own. Cause I know that you do just what you're told. I'll be your heart temptation. Cause I know that you make me on your own. Baby, you can count on me now. When you're falling down, 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 I will find a light in your soul. I'll be there. Leaving you alone is the hardest. Even when you're out of focus, I will be the light in your life. You're seeing. I'll be your inspiration. Cause I know that you'll do just what you're told. I'll be your heart temptation. Cause I know that you'll be.
Hello, hello, Fungi. Are you still with us?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep,
I see.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yep, I'm here.
Great. Let's see. We have the doctor in the house.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I am so surprised that you're up and looking so fresh and ready.
Well, to be honest with you, we are in a resort area with my family for Thanksgiving holiday, and I just came up to this resort to because I didn't want to bother my family so early, so that I could be with you all today. So I'm very excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No, this is wonderful. I just enjoy this so much. Only problem was I forgot to bring my dress up clothes with me, so I'm in my running gear this morning. I apologize.
It's okay. We're all casual. We're all family. It's fine.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Hi, Munya.
Hi, Rufara, how are you?
Welcome back. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I can't complain.
Okay, cool. And the beautiful Yvonne. Hello again. Can she hear me? Yay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let me introduce us because it looks like it'll be just us for now. Maybe Nyasha will join us later. But I just want to introduce, because I think everybody else was introduced initially before, but I want to introduce Dr. Jones, who is joining us now. And Dr. Jones is a professor of sports admin and has been traveling to Zim to do some workshops for a couple of years now. So I can't wait for all the information and the things that he has to share with us about how he sees the Zim sports industry in comparison to all these other industries and in conjunction with what he has studied and how we are faring right now. And then we have Yvonne, I'm going to introduce again, and she's a sports marketing consultant based in Kenya. And unlike Zim, we get a lot of corporates investing in their sports industry and the government involved as well. So I can't wait to hear what she has to offer in terms of our panel today. And also how she'll share how sports properties in Africa, be it marketing and how we can better it. And then we have Munya in the building as well, who is also formidable in the same industry and has his own company running and doing some amazing things in Zimbabwe currently. So, and then again, I'm joining Fungi. If anyone's joining us now, Fungi is my wonderful co-host, and he is based in Switzerland, and he works for Infront Sports as head of marketing and communication. So yeah, this is an amazing panel, guys. And yeah, just let's get ready to soak it in. Fungi, I will give it to you to take it away for this next segment.
Thanks, Rufaro. Is Nyasha going to be joining us, or we're pressing on? I think Munya, you will cover also for Nyasha. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or he's away organizing an event somewhere, perhaps. That's a trick question, by the way, because I know there are no events happening. But
Wow.
I think perhaps that will be perhaps our starting point. I mean, obviously, in Africa, like in most cases, in Europe and around the world, events are more or less been pulled back. Where they're going ahead. There are no fans in the stadiums, and we know what impact it has had on both, from a property perspective and from a brand perspective. But I mean, maybe starting with you, Munya, in your experience of hosting major events, I mean, what has been your experience thus far, and taking into account the whole COVID situation, what's happening?
Sorry, repeat the question again.
So I'm just saying, just to start from, I mean, we're talking about, in jest about the whole COVID, but I'll be keen to start learning from you what your experience in terms of sports event organizing in Zimbabwe has been prior to this, and what are your thoughts going forward? How are you going to be perhaps tackling this event organization going forward? Sorry, can you hear me?
Okay. So for me, pretty much, I've been involved with a lot of the tournaments that have happened in Zim over the past 8 years, from rugby to cricket. So I've covered the under 20 rugby national qualifiers. I've covered the Zimbabwe cricket, not Zimbabwe, but the World Cup cricket qualifiers in 2018 as well. Pretty much then with us, most of this, we mostly had help, obviously, from the ICC and from the IRB moving forward. But obviously with Zim and the administrators we have, things also do get a bit difficult, because obviously you're trying to bring in new ideas to the forefront, but because you're still a junior and these guys have been in the game for so long, you're obviously going to get squashed for any ideas you have. So obviously now moving forward with COVID, it's also going to be a bit tricky. As I don't know if you guys heard, like recently, the Zim under 20 football team had their tour to South Africa canceled recently. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. But it's things like that where people are not getting out of the bubble and moving with the world to make events happen, pretty much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I think you raised some pertinent points there in terms of the management of sport in Zimbabwe. I think coming to you, Dr. Jones, you've been traveling to Zimbabwe quite a bit. From your point of view, what are some of the strengths and the weaknesses that we see in terms of sports sponsorship, sports administration, etc.?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the panel with all these wonderful professionals who are doing such wonderful work in one of my favorite places to visit. Like I said, I've been coming to Zimbabwe, or really to Africa, for about 15 years now. And my university, we've hosted about 12 African scholars from various countries. And I'm just always, just so blessed to be around such resourceful, innovative, ingenious, and hardworking professionals that I believe have a story. And unfortunately, their story just doesn't always hit the front page of the news where it can resonate, where it can take hold. I fear that some people may give up if they don't see results and outcomes. I come to visit. I do empowerment and educational sessions on helping to advance sport management scholarship and the notion of how to create more of a science-based approach to sport management, because I believe it's all science. And you make progress, and then things like COVID come and just knock you flat. And so that the idea of continuing to be resilient in the face of such odds, that's what worries me the most. But the optimistic point is that the country is so vibrant. They're so special in terms of their ability to create. I was just mentioning to some friends earlier that we had 9 Nigerians drafted just recently in one of our sport leagues, the highest number ever. And when we look at the folks that produce the sport, even around the world, they still are Africans or African descent. There's just no question. What we've got to do is continue to monetize that. We've got to monetize that. We can't always be the producers of someone else's economy. My idea of coming to Africa has always been to keep helping to wake that sleeping giant, to help people on that side recognize that they have the power. They have the power because every time one of their individuals, come in science, in mathematics, in engineering to our country, they are at the top of their class. So why can't they do that in their own country? How come we can't build that economy in Africa? That's been my whole platform, is to help to continue to struggle to bring this continent that has the largest population within the next 20 years. It'll have the youngest population on the planet. It still has all the natural resources on the planet. There's no question. We just have to see how we can take hold of our own economy and our own destiny, and that's what excites me about coming to Africa. I visited, all over the continent, and everywhere I go, I see the same thing, and it just inspires me. But it hurts me to see that they continue to have that limited view. They can't see past their own challenges, and to me, that's really. And some folks that make it, and this is the other problem that I see, some folks that make it, they make it for themselves and not for their fellow man. And that's the other part. When you look in Nigeria, for example, and three of the world's billionaires are in Nigeria alone. But the country is just, getting, so, those are things that, I'm getting off the question, but it kind of, I want to just talk about Zimbabwe and how I believe that from my perspective, there is a tremendous amount of what I call potential. There's a lot of work that's going on. We just need to find the right partners. I've worked with some NBA teams now that are working to advance the NBA in Africa. And that's something that I think we can really look forward to in the next 5 years. Once we get COVID in our back in the rearview mirror, I think there's going to be an explosion. We have a new administration that's just taking hold. I've actually applied to work for them in their State Department to try to do some work with Africa to kind of channel sport as a potential for some of these not only important economic partnerships, but also to help to tell that story, to help get those folks in the front pages of what we're trying to do when we look at building a world economy that helps everybody.
Yeah, excellent. I think you really touched on quite a many points, and so I'm going to come back to some of those as part of our session. But I'd like to come back to Yvonne. Your own take and perspective. I mean, you mentioned icebreaker. When you work with Lagare Sports, now Sport 5. You have quite broad knowledge of sport in Africa. I mean, what has been your experience, just to start off with?
Thank you so much. So I believe that, just as Dr. Johns mentioned, that there's a lot of potential for Africans to be part of the solution for some of the challenges that we have, especially in sports. So from my experience over the past few years, I have met so many people who are passionate about sport, and they are aware of the fact that not each one of them can actually be able to make it to play and represent their nation. So they're actually lost as to how they can be still involved in the game. So most of them end up being limited to just being fans, as opposed to actually making considerable contribution towards sports. So of course, sometimes the mindset is usually that we have a long way to go. But I think what most African sports stakeholders always forget is that the road to professional sports, as we can see in Europe and the States, was not realized that far. That long ago, it was just in the recent 2 decades that most sports actually went fully professional. So I think we do have the potential to run sports in a professional manner. So I believe that we can utilize resources such as Dr. John's here and some of the universities to sort of open up the capacity building, to build the capacity of some of these people who are so passionate about sport, but they're limited in terms of their participation and making significant contribution.
Yeah, I mean, you also mentioned earlier on, and I think it's something that you are involved in as well, working with governments. I mean, what role do you see governments playing in terms of contributing that upliftment, both from an investment of resources alongside perhaps brands, as we had earlier on, like CBZ are doing with Matilda?
Governments actually are the backbone of the success of the sports ecosystem in any country. So some of the challenges that during my career I have faced is actually just the lack of knowledge in terms of how the government interacts and contributes towards sports. It is a normal African story to always hear about governments having to contribute to teams to travel and honor some of their fixtures, which is something that shouldn't happen because most regional and continental fixtures are usually sent out in advance. So in an ideal situation, the sports teams or the sports federations should be in a position to actually mobilize resources way before. It is very important for the sports stakeholders to understand their roles, and governments can play a very crucial role in that because it begins with the ministries of sports understanding how they contribute to the sustainability of sports. And as you can see in South Africa, some decisions like the government putting in place policies to support the companies that invest in sports actually go a long way in ensuring that we have more people taking part in contributing to a sustainable sports ecosystem.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, that's very, very pertinent point that you raised there. Welcome, Nyasha. I see you keep coming in and dropping out. I hope you can have a good connection. One of the points that I raised, Nyasha, at the beginning before you joined, I guess, was connected with what I asked Munya. You're also involved with play-by-play in actually putting events out. What has been your experience thus far? And I mean, how do you see this working out going forward for you after the COVID situation?
Yeah, no, it's been an exciting experience, a journey which we've really enjoyed, being creative and with minimum resources, come up with a product or products which our community can engage in and participate in and enjoy. And part of that has been, we've been, like at the end of the day, as much as we're organizers, we're also consumers. So we enjoy sport ourselves. So the question we always ask ourselves in our board meetings is, what do we enjoy? And funny enough, that's the question we asked ourselves when we then hosted what most termed the Super Rugby teams playing their exhibition games in Zimbabwe a couple of years ago. Me and the guys were watching the South African teams play on TV, and we all kind of barracked for the Sharks for obvious reasons. One of our friends, Tendai Bismtara, plays for them. But we asked ourselves, imagine if we could just go down the road and watch that game, then it's like, oh, why not? Who do you know? And before you know it, within the contact base, we managed to string together an exciting match where Bulls and Cheetahs played in Zimbabwe for the first time. A lot of locals were blown away. They're like, yeah, why hadn't this happened all this time? And so I think in terms of the creativity, sometimes we can overthink things and think, we want to think of something rocket science, but really the answers are there within us if we just sit down and brainstorm and come up with the ideas we have. But we found that people are engaging and people want something similar to what the rest of the world experiences. So generally, it's not difficult to come up with, but it's like what the previous speakers mentioned, is coming up with a product which is affordable, accessible to all, and get the right returns on investments for those corporates who then come on board.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on a very interesting point, and also mentioned in the previous panel. Obviously, you're a very young company together with Munya and Yvonne as well. But what challenges are you really facing out there, from an African context, in trying to convince, corporates, whether it's your CBZ or whoever, to come on board and invest in this kind of events, to bring the cheetahs to play bulls in Zimbabwe? I mean, how do you convince them? What does it take?
Yeah, it takes these corporates believing in young people, which is a difficult thing generally in Zimbabwe. But we've been fortunate. I'm grateful to some of the corporates who've come on board, Dairy Board, Old Mutual, who've believed in us, and especially Old Mutual, the first ones. Here it is. You got two, with three of us at the time who walked into that meeting, coming in and we're saying, look, we can host this high-profile game, and they're looking at us and they're like, you guys are going to pull this thing off, So it took a lot of guts from their end, which we're always grateful for, to believe in us, and we did pay that back with pulling off something which was great, and everyone enjoyed. But it's going to take. That's been the challenge, is corporate believing in young people. But another challenge we find is that sport has never been really used as to the full extent it should, as a source for marketing products. So the question is always they ask is, they always look, more corporates than not look always like, how many cartons of milk am I going to sell after this event? And it's looking for that immediate, the game has ended, how many did I sell? So it's always trying to show them in other categories, other statistics on how they've built a base of following, how they've built a loyalty, how their brand is now perceived. So I think it also, the question, the onus is also on us who go into that room and putting figures and mapping things out in a way that they can also see return on investment, and it's not always direct dollar sales on the particular moment, but how else have they gained return on investment?
Yeah, and I think it touches on what Dr. Jones mentioned. Maybe I come to Yvonne on this one. You talked about being able to believe in young people, and Dr. Jones gave some very interesting examples of young people coming from Nigeria, etc. And he believes it's very important that as Africa we tend to find our own solutions to some of these problems. Now, coming back to you, Yvonne, it's quite a big ask for sponsors to just from the whim, yes, let's believe in young people, but there is no context to build upon. But when it comes to bigger events, they're very quick to go for it. I mean, how do we bridge the gap for them to say, look, yes, believe in young people, believe in what we're trying to do, just as much as you're quick to snap up those opportunities for the bigger organizations and bigger brands?
Actually, I found it very useful to have data-backed strategies. One of the key things that I work and insist on is strategy identification before any project. So when you are in the process of making your strategy for any particular project, then the best thing that you can do for yourself is back up any recommendations with data. So if you look statistically at the majority of the population in African countries, then you'll realize that the median age is very youthful. So it means that any company that has intent to actually push product has to have their messaging architecture speak to that population. I found that despite the age disparities, I'm going to digress a little bit and give an example of my first job at the Kenya Rugby Union. I used to be introduced not as the marketing executive of Kenya Rugby Union, but as this little girl and it happened for the period that I used to work there, despite significantly contributing to some of the success of the Kenya Rugby Union. So while it is difficult to automatically change the mindset of some of these people who are within decision-making positions, both in companies and even within the sports institutions, I believe that as young people, as a youthful generation, the best we can do is to back some of our recommendations with data as to how anyone who wants to get involved in sports can speak to the majority of the population at that particular time. So a good example for us in Kenya is how we ended up curating the sports events to cater for the youthful population. So there was a very huge trend, especially in most sports. So rugby generally is usually considered an elitist sport. So it comes with a certain profile, and hence we conducted research in partnership with Ipsos Synovet, which indicated that 75% of the people who actually came to rugby games did not come for the rugby. Most of them didn't even know who was playing. They can remember details of who they came with to the game, and have all those funny stories of the things that the non-rugby things that happened. So what we ended up doing is that we curated rugby events to cater for those people, because they feel the stand, and that is good for the sponsors. So rugby ended up positioning itself in a way which was attractive to everyone. So it became the thing to do. We saw more kids, so we ended up creating areas for kids. There was the partying youthful generation who wanted to party. So we created concerts. So we had a long-time beverage partner that had been in the sport for over 20 years. But in terms of converting that into sales, they weren't able to have something substantial enough to warrant for an increased investment in terms of sponsorship. So one of the biggest challenges has always been that sports is taken as a charity, and most of the sports organizations are always going and approaching brands as beggars rather than rights holders. So in terms, I mentioned about knowledge. So on both ends of the spectrum, we have sports organizations who are not aware that they do have a goose that lays the golden egg in terms of the rights. And then on the other end, we have brands who are unaware of how to interact with potential and existing customers within the sports unit. So over time, I found it a bit easier to try and gather as much data as possible, so that whenever we are interacting in terms of sponsorship and partnership, then you can back it with data, which is easier to be given a voice rather than, I have this exciting thing, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on a very interesting thread there, which before I just jump to Dr. Jones to give us a bit of a presentation that he has, I want to come to Munya, because I think this ties in with what you were saying at the very beginning. From Yvonne's thread, there is a topic of onboarding that I clearly emerging here. From your end, perhaps Munya and Nyasha, I mean, how do you onboard your partner? How easy is it to onboard partners? Taking on from what Yvonne has said. I'm looking at the Zimbabwean context anyway.
For me, it's like I was totally agreeing with what Yvonne was saying. I like how she said during rugby games they had to choose, they had to cater for the people that will come for different reasons. And it's the same thing in Zimbabwe. You have rugby games. Most people don't even come there just for the game, and they hardly even follow it. But because of that certain culture, we now have to create a culture where you have create a whole leisure system where you're catering for kids, you're catering for family, you're catering for the people that want to party. That is the only way I feel now in Zim we can actually start growing like crowds, especially. And then another thing we also struggle with in Zim is mostly like with the sports club owners, the people that own the sports clubs here. I feel like mostly they are more inclined to, they don't really care about the game, whatever sport is being played. All they're worried about these days is probably to get money into their pocket. So they make it difficult for us event organizers to come and create an event that is worthy and that will have everyone jumping, everyone excited. So you're limited, like your resources are limited to having the event that you really want to have, that the event that's going to showstop. Yeah.
And then lastly, from your side, Nyasha, I mean, is there a certain process that you think, you could go through in terms of this onboarding, the 1, 2, 3 of the onboarding process that you can come up with from your side?
Yeah, I think certainly you have to do your time as well. But we've been fortunate that once we go in Zim, one of the things is once you get the scoreboard ticking in terms of doing something with however small, and then and you build a reputation, and the buy-in becomes more natural. Then when you knock on the next door, they've heard of you. So we've found growth in partnership with corporates, and as well as athletes as well. We've grown with athletes. We've seen more professional athletes approaching us to be signed on by us, and more corporates approaching us to manage their events. They might have come up with a concept, then they engage us on how can we enhance it, and that. So we're very fortunate in that sense. But I think part of the process is that it has to be authentic. If you're going to come in with sport, you have to be authentically for sport. You can't just see dollar signs and think that you're going to talk your way through, and people see through it. I think people see the genuineness. So be genuine, create win-win situations. Don't just create win-win situations for your organization, but create win-win situations for the partner who's coming on, for the community. And the more scenarios we can have of win-win situations, then the community all buys into the whole concept. The corporates, the fans, the stakeholders, the kids, and as well as government institutions. So it's an area we focus on a lot in terms of creating that process on, okay, how many people have we involved? How many win-win situations have we created in this scenario? And then eventually the thing it just grows from there. The event grows from there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I mean, while I believe Dr. Jones has just jumped off, but while we're waiting for him to come back, I think I'll go back again just briefly to Simone. I mean, working in Africa, one interesting story that I think has been remarkable in the last couple of years is that of Rwanda sponsoring Arsenal. And there has been a lot of things spoken about this kind of sponsorship. Now, from your point of view, is this something that countries that are not extremely well off should be doing in terms of sponsoring, multi-million worth teams? I mean, what is your take on that?
It's actually dependent on the objectives that the country does have. For Rwanda's case, again, I'm not privy to the details or the authenticity of the reports that come out of Rwanda in terms of the value that partnership brought, but. First, it's not a unique case for them to do that. So nothing to write home about, although it took the world by storm considering the economy of Rwanda. So from Rwanda's perspective, their objective was to create that awareness, and in marketing, then you do need actually to make as much noise as possible, and then work from there, to build. So from a sport perspective, sport was not the objective of the partnership initially, and so some people like me were really disappointed about that because. There's so many opportunities that would have been taken advantage of in such partnerships. Like for instance, I'll give an example. While I still worked at SportPesa partnered with Arsenal, and some of the key benefits that happened was that the teams of the Premier League, which we were also sponsoring in Kenya, we were able to have an capacity building program for the administrators. So now we have more people and more teams who have dedicated secretariats to handle the day-to-day running of the clubs, which is a huge step in terms of trying to professionalize operations, especially within sport. So considering that Rwanda entered into such a partnership, then the football in Rwanda would have greatly benefited more if the partnership was more skewed towards the sports side. But again, the government was more interested in the tourism side, and they do report that they actually achieved it. So it's not something that we can go into detail to discuss in this panel, because that particular partnership, despite using sports as a passion focus point, was more tourism inclined than sport inclined.
Yeah, and I think we've got a very interesting thread there. I see Dr. Jones has come back. He had gone to find a power outlet. But before I bring you in, Dr. Jones, with your presentation, I'm just going to switch to Munya, because you mentioned earlier on, icebreaker, what the play-by-play are doing in terms of trying to create new concepts in sports tourism and using sports as a channel for tourism. Now, threading into what Yvonne has said, what will be the approach then in Zimbabwean context? And because we also know there's a cost to it.
Funny enough, Zimbabwe cricket have actually engaged in something similar. I think it's the Zimbabwean government that were involved, and now Zimbabwe cricket are actually playing with the Visit Zimbabwe logo on their cricket jerseys. A lot of money was put into that, but I'm not sure about all the finer details regarding that. But I know from a tourism perspective, I think that is what they're trying to do, pretty much to just get people to be coming down to Zimbabwe. I'm not going to come in and say it's more for sporting reasons, because I really don't know what exactly what are the finer details regarding the deal. Yeah.
Okay, so just to jump in, Fungai, quickly, I actually just wanted to add on to what people were saying, or at least kind of throw the spanner in the works a little bit, because as much as we want to build in terms of coming through and basically getting the government and corporate engagement, I think obviously because now from corporate to government, especially in the African context, we're always going to think of benefits. But at the same time, at some point during that period where, that high school stage, especially in Zimbabwe, there is a very, 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 very hectic love for sports and even just competitiveness and all that. How can we bridge that gap between, how do we continue to spur on that enthusiasm? Because I find like the American context, like maybe something Dr. Jones can come in and interject and share on, but you guys have gotten into college sports or whatever. Like I feel maybe it dies down in the university stage of things and then you just zone out and there's no sports. Or like, how can we foster that? Because that's a huge gap, and until that also is bridged, I feel we will continue to struggle to try to reach here, reach there, and it's sort of like a push and pull.
Yeah, and I think you're right that there's so much going on. Sorry, Yvonne, you wanted to mention something.
Actually, Rufaro just touched on something that I wanted to mention. I think there's a huge there are many loopholes within our player development, and as such, we do not encourage a sporting culture that is strong enough to warrant a sporting economy, because just like any other economy, it's about demand and supply. But if there's no sporting culture, then people are not going to want to be part of it. Even the brands and government will not realize the importance of sport as it is. So maybe just as a parting shot, I have been trying to get a reaction from all of you actually, and I purposely wore this jersey today, but none of you has actually commented on one of the
We are coming for you, Yvonne. We're coming for you.
So we have the Africa Champions League final today. 2 teams. One of them is the biggest team in the world, Al Ahly. and the most decorated African team. But why is the African space? Just Rufaro had very important questions, and I think the biggest question for us, and when we do get to answer it, then we can find our solution. One of it is, why isn't Africa talking about their own Champions League? Trust you me, everyone right now on our social media feed is trying to predict the teams that are going to make the team tomorrow. We are all creating our fantasy league teams, so that we can get the most points. But what are we doing about our Champions League?
Yeah.
Al Ahly is actually the most decorated football club in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that point later on.
I'll answer
that point, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. But I think with that, I think we jumped to Dr. Jones to give us a little presentation. But I'll come back and I'll tell you why that is the case, because we've faced this question, when we went to brands, for COSAFA, for example. So I'll come back to that. But Dr. Jones, please.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. This conversation is so robust and so challenging. It is really very, very high spirited. My presentation, includes several of the comments that you all have been talking about. So I'd like to go ahead and get that started now, if you will. Can you pull that up, Cassette? Is he pulling it up?
Yeah, we can see it from our side. I think it just needs to get into the presentation mode.
Okay, good. Yeah, because several of the conversations that you've been having are just so incredibly important, I think, to the overall picture of what we're dealing with here: brand spanking, youth and technology, understanding the real way to build wealth and the way to have. Sometimes I think we have this generational problem. The older, more entrenched folks have positions that they feel they are entitled to because of their hard work and effort, and they keep the young people out. And the young people have all the innovation, all the creativity, and that's where one of the gaps that one of your presenters were talking about. But okay, let me just let you know what we're going to talk about today. Thank you so much again for being a part of this. It's exciting. It's dynamic. I have, as a matter of fact, already booked my trip to Zimbabwe for this September, if everything goes well with the COVID and the vaccines that we are. But real quick with my journey, I have been, engaged with Africa, like I said, for over 15 years. So I'll share my journey. I'll talk about what I believe to be Africa's capacity and, of course, its potential, which I'm sure all of you all know. And, of course, the work I've done with SLEES. We're working with Rwanda. I heard that comment brought up. And with Cairo Sports, one of our new partners who we really believe have tapped into a younger, more what I believe powerful approach because of the virtual nature and their use of technology. And of course, talk a little bit about Africa's future and some of the work I'm doing with the WNBA and the NBA. And then maybe I'll take a few questions. Next. So, okay, over the past, that's not, can you make that little, okay. It was a little small. Okay. So over the past 15 years, I've really established a strong foothold in international communities. I've started, the African Sport Management Association with a lot of my colleagues, not only from Zimbabwe, but from East Africa, South Africa, and West Africa. We've had scholars visiting my university from Nairobi, Abuja, Kampala, Harare, Benin. We just have scholar partners, I believe, all over the continent. If you look at the role of the African Sport Management Association, which it's not lived up to these lofty goals, but at least that was our intent. And as I'm working with some of my other partners, they tell me that they're still working on achieving these, but trying to bridge that gap that we know exists between sports and economics in Africa. The fact that sports as a export generates billions of dollars for other countries' economies. Once again, sport as an export from Africa enhances billions of dollars worth of the economy in countries like the U.S. and most EU countries and Germany and some of those other countries. And the notion of the sport, what we call the brain drain and the talent flight that continues to be leaving Africa, transform athletics into some type of a manner that allows sport management professionals in Africa to build their business and their business capacity to engage in cross-national research and host international conferences. These are the goals of the African sport management, and as we all know, they haven't been achieved. But these are your African, professionals who helped develop these, and they're, I think they're very targeted and very on point. And of course, develop this learning opportunities for sport management scholars to attend jointly addressed, some of these glaring issues that we have with these gifted athletes trying to access resources like technology and their expertise so that they can perform authentically in front of their own country in a prideful and in a very lucrative and economically gratifying format that can also have an impact on local businesses. So we want to also talk about the partnerships we built with Kenyatta University. We have MOUs with Chambogo in Uganda. We have an MOU with the Sport Leadership Institute of Zimbabwe. And of course, our partnership with Kigali in Rwanda is another area that we find a lot of potential. Next. Now, okay, so the main question and the main comment of my presentation, and whenever Cassette invited me to do this, and I did some think about it, is if not now, then when? Africa continues to, as I said, have more potential to impact the world with its athletic prowess, with its grace of its athletes, with its power of their will to win, to compete, to entertain, to build any team they go to, they become the difference makers on those teams. And the notion that we continue to see that this potential, when is Africa going to be able to start earning their value from these athletic events, these athletes, these opportunities that they have to change the dynamics of sporting events around the world? So when we look at this, it's the capacity that they have, but also the potential. And we need to find a way, I believe, to get those two on the same page. When we talked earlier in the session, they mentioned the marketing and how to get these companies to become more engaging with paying for some advertising and some marketing support. Well, one of the things that we look at, I think 2 or 3 things. First of all, is branding. When we convince them always that you don't always invest in a product or a company to see immediate return. The ROI is not necessarily going to have a immediate impact. It's the branding, the brand spanking. And for example, the best argument I would give them is that if you start with someone who's in their teens with a certain product, like a Nike product, they'll be a Nike customer for the rest of their lives. And I think that's the argument that Africans need to be able to convince people, that if you get these young consumers at their teenage years and they can grow and become economically viable and gain, some type of social status, then they become your customers for life. And with the eyeballs and all of the billions of people that are available, and but the people who run the telecoms, they know that. The people who operate, for example, I never go to East Africa anywhere unless after every session they stop at one of the local watering holes and they order Tasker. I mean, the beer is legendary. I mean, you'd be surprised. I count sometimes they might have 50 or 60 bottles a night. And this company advertises for the big soccer leagues, but how much does that money come back to Africa? They drink the beer, They buy the product, they watch the games, but does any of that money go to Africa, or does it just go back to the teams that are located in Europe? So I think those are things that we think about in terms of the disconnect when there's capacity. Can you go to the next one, please? Okay, so it's Africa's time. That's the message, all of us. And I believe it's urgent now because everybody knows in Asia, in India, they know, and they have been building and marketing themselves as the, folks who can create this wealth by offering small people, groups of people, large pieces of the pie, as opposed to offering, a large number of people a small piece of the pie. In other words, a few rich people get rich, but it doesn't trickle down to the masses, and that's another problem with some of the people that are currently investing. But of course, we know that Africa is the world's second largest, most populous continent. This was the figure that recently in 2019, 1,319,862,447 folks. Population is 16.72 of the world population. 60% of the population is currently 24 and below. Average age is 19.4 years. That is an advertiser's dream. That's a marketer's, that is a fantasy for anybody to find a population of that age, understanding the capacity that they have to work, to build, to consume, to produce. It's unlimited. So by the end of the century, almost half of the young people in the world will be in sub-Saharan Africa. Almost half. In 2050, Africa will have the largest number of young people, making up to nearly twice the young population in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and of course, Oceania. Those are just mind-boggling numbers. The combined individual wealth of all Africans is $2.3 trillion today. By the end of 2027, it will be increased to 3.1 trillion. Clearly, it is boom time in Africa. How can we take those numbers and translate those to a larger body? So currently, what are my efforts to get to where we are? We're looking at, the Sport Leadership Institute of Zimbabwe with Marazda. I know a lot of y'all know him. He's a great friend of mine and a good colleague and has a great business mind. He and I met, at one of our conferences, and we currently are working with him. And what we normally do is train his professionals in sport management science, which is my area of expertise. In Rwanda, what we were working with them is a product in, they built this new stadium. It's a multi-million-dollar stadium. They were scheduled to host the first African, FIBA World Championship that was, sponsored by the NBA. I was scheduled to go there in March. Of course, we know the COVID kicked that in the butt. But, Rwanda has capital. They're investing. The sport tourism that you talked about earlier is important. And they have one thing I worry a little bit about Rwanda and what they're doing is they have FIFA as one of their major, what I call leaders, because they told me when I was working with them that they actually have FIFA professionals marketing FIBA and marketing the NBA basketball, which I don't understand because obviously FIFA is not a African, institution. So I don't understand that. Okay, current efforts. I know I got to move along. Sports Institute of Zimbabwe, training sport managers, credentialing some of these folks through universities, so they have a professional, certification or some type of a, digital badging that allows for, various, for example, when you talk about young people who may not have access to colleges and universities, but have a lot of talent and skill, the idea of getting them into some of these professionalized courses that can help them understand how to build wealth, how to use their knowledge with coding and their social media savvy and all of those things, and have that become business, micro businesses through some of the skill sets. Also, Kyra Sports, my university just this past semester, we had the most exciting time with Cassette coming to my classes, offering rugby as a way to introduce some of the sports to the U.S. And what he's done is he's inviting several of my students to work as interns with his new app that's going to be used to advance some of the analytics in rugby, which is why I believe very strongly that now you have, in my mind, one of the first examples of how an international firm focused on Africa can build their wealth by engaging in U.S. students to help them beta test it, do some actual marketing to see how it's branded, how useful it is. And of course, we talked about Rwanda, the infrastructure building that they're doing, and working with some of the folks there. Next. So what about Africa's future? Now, obviously, I'm very limited in my view here, so I'm going to be upfront with you. I'm just a professor, and I've been to Africa, like I said, because I love it and I love the people, and I believe I bet on Africa every day of the week in terms of its innovation, its creativity, and its people, its power. So that's where I come from. I don't have a broad economic, what I call economic globe or future view. So I think that the future is commercializing sport in Africa. That, to me, is the key from a standpoint, because we all know that when you think about how do you build a country's wealth, there's a lot of ways through its products, natural resources, through its, science and its agriculture products. But for now, I believe that sport has a unique position because of the virility and the power of its athletes that continue to produce wealth, but they produce wealth for everybody else. The idea of commercializing sport in Africa as an African, industry, or as an African, economic engine. How do we bring some of the income back to Africa that these athletes create? That, to me, is the key, because it's low-hanging fruit. You have athletes that right now are generating millions of dollars in the U.S. Through advertising, through commercials, through endorsements, through winning games, sponsorships. It's just really the sky's the limit. How then do we monetize that? That, to me, is one of the discussions we need to have. And obviously that, I believe, comes from having these younger people. The younger people know how to use technology to advance their own interests. Why can't we have them use the technology to advance the interests of sport or of entertainment? Help them learn how to monetize that. The WNBA and NBA partnership building. Right now, there is this huge rush by NBA teams to build a partnership in Africa. And you know why? Because that's where the eyeballs are. That's where the customers are. So because we know that there is a market for the NBA in Africa, just like it was in China. China kind of was kicking the NBA out. So the NBA is trying to really find this next big, partner. That partner is the NBA. And, Magic Johnson said he's going to spend $50 million in Africa to build the NBA. We need to find ways, don't sleep at night, but find ways to get a part of that partnership and help build that. Because when I started to look at it, I was shocked to see that FIFA, what the hell is FIFA doing trying to build the NBA in Africa? That, to me, is just the kind of cutthroat, tactics that they use, because they'll get in and the money and all the infrastructure will go to FIFA. It won't go to Africa. Africa will be waiting for them to get a piece of it once it's already established. But we need to really get our own, institutions in Africa to build that partnership, and then sustaining sport economy. So to me, this is where you start to have a few, like what I would do if I was really the folks here, I would get a summit. I would have a summit of every African that is playing a sport on another continent. I would say, okay, guys, I don't care if it's 1,000, 10,000. Let's sit down and have a discussion how we can sustain sport in your own country through your own economy. And that would be billions of dollars that these athletes generate for others. If they could only pledge 10% to a institution in Africa, I don't care who it is, and then you could use that to build stadiums, to train people, to invest in local, professionals who are doing stuff. To me, that's where you can get your biggest bang for your buck. Just have somebody get these folks together who are generating this wealth, and they can even put in their contracts. They can put in their contract, if they're powerful enough, 10% of my contract goes to Africa. I mean, they did it in Latin America. If you go to Latin America, they used to spend time in Venezuela. They would have, Luis Soho or Andres Galarraga. They built stadiums from their own money. They had training set up in the various parts of the country. And, if you look at some of the impact of that, it's pretty big. In-home skill sport leaders. Now, this is what I do. Is train sport leaders through marketing, management, leadership, organizational behavior, organizational theory, just helping them, narrow some of their decision-making skills. Invest more in the real leaders that are coming along, helping them see their skill sets from the standpoint of, how do you actually build the infrastructure yourself? How do you build a brand? How do you market your products? How do you get sustaining funds and create this set of skills that these leaders then can multiply? The in-home skill is about a multiplier effect. You know what I mean? You want to say, if there's 10 people that are trained, they should go out and train 20. They should go out and train 30. They should go out and get those sport leaders who have authentic skills, authentic management science backgrounds, who have the wherewithal to mentor, to create, the kinds of economic levers that we have. Next. Okay, so that's just some of my ideas. I didn't want to have a long presentation, but I did want to share with you some of the things that I've been working on. Do any of you guys have questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones. Quite a very insightful presentation there. I think I've learned a thing or two myself. I'm actually doing my own MBA, so I might steal some of your ideas and thought processes there. But maybe my first question, and I'll also open to the other panelists here, you touched on the whole sustained economy approach. And I think for me, this bridges something that we're talking about earlier on with Yvonne, Nyasha and Munya. Now, we all know, if we want to do such an event that brings together, African sportsmen and women from around the world to come together to discuss the solutions, we all know that, the government and the corporates need to come together. And it's normally a challenge to do this in Africa, in my experience. I mean, what are the incentives can government give to the corporates, and vice versa? How can corporates work with the government to realize this? I mean, I also talk from a context of Zimbabwe. I mean, we recently had our Minister of Tourism, as well as the government, talking about how do we bring all the Zimbabwean sports stars from all over the world to promote tourism, but ultimately somebody has to pick up, the tab along the way.
This is the great question. Here? This is an awesome question, and I can't believe you asked the perfect question, because if you would only look at how many African Americans themselves pay $5,000-$6,000 to go on cruises. They go on a cruise 3 or 4 times a year. And you know what's on their dream list? Every one of them I talk to them, their dream list, their bucket list. I want to go to Africa. I want to go to Africa. If you take the millions of African Americans just themselves in the United States and build sport tourism, this is lucrative. I mean, you don't understand how powerful that could be to tell these Africans just one trip a year, come to Africa, come to Zimbabwe and see, Victoria Falls or Great Zimbabwe. Come to, Africa and enjoy the people, the culture, the fun, the entertainment. Be a part of your own history. I mean, to me, if Africans could think bigger and put themselves in a place of an African American who's been oppressed, you know what I mean, who's been denied an identity. You can see it just in the Trump administration. They are hungry for an identity. They want to be a part of their motherland in the worst kind of way, and they'll pay big money to do that. They'll pay big money, and it doesn't have to be, we're gonna make billions of dollars. Just start with small, one or two very successful sport tourist events and attract people, and you'd be surprised. I mean, I had one of my mentors, 80 years old, white guy. I was in Zimbabwe and he came right after me. Now, this guy is not, anybody who's culturally or tolerant at all. He just had a son-in-law that got married in South Africa. So he wanted to just make a trip to Zimbabwe because it was next door. But they came back talking about, oh my goodness, how beautiful the country is, how wonderful the people are. I mean, that's how you, word of mouth, get those experiences, and that builds. All of a sudden you get Chicago, you get Miami, you get, Pittsburgh, you get Detroit, Blacks who want to come and be a part of what's going on in Africa. And I've been an advocate for a long time that until we can get both of our, expatriates, together with our motherland, we're never going to be as powerful as we can be. And that, to me, is something Africans need to talk about. We are like a lost people in a way, you know what I mean? And then Africa still has the colonization effects that they still fight with. But if we get both of those together on an ongoing basis, I think we can really build a holistic, kind of a person who has mental, security, but also can also provide the economic and entertainment and also social benefit.
Yeah, excellent. And I think, I'll just bring in Yvonne there. If you can perhaps add on to that, Yvonne, but in addition to that, I also want to ask you a question because you touched on the grassroots. And for me, how can the grassroots then tap into such an initiative that is being driven, from abroad and actually realize value from it? But please go ahead.
As Dr. Jones was talking, I'm reminded of some of the most successful things that we've done in Kenya and Uganda. Rugby has been a great beneficiary of this. We have had for the past 24 years the Safari Sevens, which was marketed as Africa's biggest rugby Sevens festival. So the Safari Sevens as a product has evolved over the years to be all inclusive in such a way that we had almost more than 25% of the people who come for Safari Sevens coming from outside Kenya. So over the years, I remember from 2013, we've actually had more people from around East Africa and Europe and the USA just specifically travel to come and enjoy the Safari Sevens. Dr. Jones earlier mentioned about the Kenyan culture of having Tuskers and beer. So in my earlier comments, I said that we try to curate events to take care of every rugby fan. And one of the things that most people enjoy is the uniqueness of the Kenyan culture. And somebody, it's globally known. The phrase Hakuna Matata is globally known. And indeed, when you do come to Kenya, you ask yourself questions like, do these people actually have mortgages to pay? Do they have school fees? Do they have rent? Do they have bills? Because the Kenyan experience or the Kenyan culture has always been, I'm going to take it all now. I'm just living for now. And most of our sports events have actually been curated to take care of that need, because everyone is always thinking about, I've been working all week, why should the weekend be as boring as such? And the reason why rugby has actually enjoyed more people in the stands has been the mere fact that you can actually have your beer while watching rugby. Something so small that cannot happen in a football field has ensured that the numbers keep coming for rugby. So I do believe that despite the external interest to have more people come in, as Dr. John said, there could be a need for that. I believe that sports organizations can take internal initiatives themselves to curate some of these events. Over the years, we ended up adding a safari package together with the Ministry of Tourism of Kenya. So one experience in Safari Sevens where we had teams, the invitational teams would actually get tickets for more people. So you are having a traveling party that is 3 or 5 times more than you had intended to take care of. And most of these people, their needs are inclusive of experiences that will ensure that they leave Kenya feeling like they had a feel of Kenya. So we started incorporating straight from the teams. The social ambassador, what Dr. Jones was saying earlier, is about making social ambassadors out of funds. So the teams that would travel to come and play in Kenya would have a holistic Kenyan experience. They come a few days before their games. Kenya is lucky that we do have a national park straight in the city. So without necessarily inconveniencing the team, they were able to do a safari within the period that they came. So one of these packages included having breakfast with the lions, So you do your safari early morning and you have breakfast right in the middle of the national park where you could enjoy the action of the wild. And the word safari goes with everyone in mind. So over the years, it becomes a requirement of any traveling team to come with a traveling party. So they talk about it. It might not look like, it might not require so much investment because most of these things you just do to the visiting team and they will pay. Their funds and the people who want to come and support them from their countries will pay for those experiences that you give free for the team. So we have to remember that even as marketing continues to grow and diversify to accommodate the changing culture of people, that the old school way of referrals among people is still the best marketing strategy. So as much as we have a need from outside to come inside, we can take initiatives to make them come by virtue of creating social ambassadors and curating sports events that actually have a cultural element that is attractive to the uniqueness of our host countries.
And let me say that you are 100% right, because if you look at this, the reality is this is bottom up. It's grassroots. If you depend on the government or your minister or leaders, they're going to find a way to put the money in their own pocket. You know what I mean? They're going to find a way to get themselves paid. But if you start with the grassroots and folks at the bottom level, then they then can build and create, the kind of, the power of the many that are horizontally empowered, not vertically. So this is a horizontal movement that I believe, and what you're saying, I think is so true. But look at myself. I came to Kenya, was the first country, Nairobi, I came to. And, I just got hooked. You know what I mean? I said, I've got to stay in Africa. My colleagues at the university kept asking me, what the hell do you want to do in Africa? You want to go to Sweden? You know what I mean? Go to Paris. You know what I mean? I tell them, my heart's in Africa. And I know a lot of other people feel the same way once they would come and be a part of what I believe to be the most unique, caring, and innovative and smart, folks on the planet.
Yeah,
I have forgotten to mention something, Fungai. I'm really sorry.
Go on.
There's one phenomena about the social ambassador that most of you will notice. During the 7th World Series, there is usually a Kenya corner in every stadium. Mark you, the World 7 Series is not held in Kenya. But always in the Kenyan culture of being carefree has been replicated across all these sports cities in such a way that there's usually a stand that sells out tickets before any other stand in the stadiums. And in the USA, Las Vegas Sevens even uses Kenyan faces to market Las Vegas Sevens, and we usually have so many parties, Kenyan themed parties in the USA to promote that very Kenyan culture. So we cannot underestimate the minimal efforts that we do make as sports organizations with regard to selling the cultural element, the unique factor in how we do things in our identity. So some of them, the Kenyan party culture in Kenya can be frowned upon, especially by the older generation. But I can assure you that the profile and the brand image that Kenya has out there, based on the unique experiences that you can experience within Kenya, has actually been more beneficial than any other thing. In that, even in World Rugby reports during their coverage, when they do their reports, it is indicative that the tournaments are more engaging and more watched when Kenya is winning. So you have two African teams that are at the core of the Sevens World Series. You have Kenya Sevens and you have South Africa. South Africa plays amazing rugby. But the Sevens World Series are quite.
Oh no, looks like.
Oh, we've lost.
More following in Africa by virtue of the dances of the. So the Kenya by virtue of those small dances, the flares, and now we have everyone dancing in rugby when they score. So do not underestimate the cultural impact to the success of the sport.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you mentioned South Africa as one of the top. I mean, may I remind you, Zimbabwe did beat Kenya last year in rugby, so just to put that out there. But thank you very much for those two. I think it was a very interesting exchange there between Yvonne and Dr. Jones. And just because of our time, Rufaro, or do you want to just come in? I'm not sure where we go now. I know we've got some questions perhaps from the audience before we go to any final thoughts.
Yeah, so I have questions, but I think I want to just read out some of these questions that we have here. Liberty says, are there any structures in place to nurture talent from grassroots to big league? I feel we've kind of touched on that. I think we've answered.
Yeah, we've answered that one.
And then there's Tawanda who said, with the honorable, because here we have Kirsty Coventry, who is quite popular in swimming. Like she won, she was a world champion. So she's now our sports minister, for anyone who doesn't know, in Zimbabwe. And having gone through the US university system, NCAA, from a governance perspective, the sports climate should be more attractive for investors, marketers, both foreign, domestic, and Zim. This could incentivize corporates. So I think this also touches on some of the things that you guys have highlighted, that we need more culturally relevant situations to bring investors in, even in terms of ambassadors, because you can have your Kirsty Coventry, you can have your Beaton Tawarara, and that now making that a bigger thing in terms of, I love what Yvonne was sharing in terms of what happens in Kenya, because culturally there's so much that can be shared. And even if you look at the South African context, how big did the Vuvuzelas get after the World Cup? Like, you saw adverts and things going on all over the place. And I can actually say I have actually noticed the Kenyan influence in the rugby sector. So that's a big thing for us to take note of, for sure, because there's tons. I mean, we also have the Victoria Falls, for instance, which is a great destination for tourism. But I had a feeling that maybe Nyasha wanted to say something in response to some of the things that was said, because I could see it in his eyes.
Please go ahead, Nyasha.
Yeah, sure. No, it's quite interesting listening to the experts on the panel and also learning. And I think one of the things I'm enjoying about this platform is that it provokes thought. Not necessarily saying that some things are new, but you get reminded, and the more often we can have these sessions as Africans or people who are trying to develop Africa, so to say, the faster we're going to move at, and the partnerships. We're reminded of the partnerships and the opportunities we can, and I think together we can achieve more. There's that African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go further, go together. And while I still have the opportunity, I'm grateful for this opportunity to brainstorm. What I wanted to add on and say is on the aspect of growing Africa as a whole in terms of sports, tourism, like I agree, we have to start small and we keep building on that. I recall when I refer back to the event we had when we hosted the professional rugby teams in Zimbabwe to host an exhibition game. We took them down to Vic Falls and they all loved it. And within a space of 12 months, when on their break, they came with their families at their own expense to the falls. And we're fortunate that they always reach out and say, "Oh, I'm on my way," and and this and that, and ensure that they get that experience which they are after, but also just reminding their host that this is a professional athlete and to make the most out of it, because not always are people in tune with the global stars that the best athletes in the world walk in and we don't know who they are, and they walk out and we don't really get the maximum value out of them. So where we can, we always try alert people of the magnitude of that person, and they can grow through social media, making aware, sign an item, hang it on the wall, which something where one of the hotels we always use, Crystal Lodge, have started doing is putting up jerseys and making them sign a jersey and hang it on the wall, and keep that tradition, and also remind the new visitors who come, on the people who've walked past that building or that institution. So I'm excited about Africa and where we're going. I think we're on the right path. We obviously got a long way to go, but I think bouncing off ideas with experts like Dr. Jones certainly does, and just the encouragement I always enjoy when he comes to Zim, just the re-emphasis, because sometimes as Africans we can doubt ourselves sometimes of, are we on the right path, and just that reaffirmation he gives us all the time when we come, like, you guys are doing fantastic, you're doing great, you're on the right path, goes a long way and re-energizes. I know, and it's true what you mentioned at the start of this discussion, is that the worry is that those who are at it could run out of steam, and it's true, and how we don't run out of steam is the constant encouragement and reminders from the best in the world, who are the forefront of elite sport, like Dr. Jones, reminding us that we're on the right path. So I think we're on the right path as Africa. We just need to harness it, coordinate it more, collaborate more, and keep being bold and adventurous in our activities. Thank you.
Cool, excellent.
You're welcome, my friend.
I guess we'll have just one round then. Any final thoughts from your side, Amunya, before we go to Dr. Jones? And I think if Yvonne comes back, we jump onto her as well. You're on mute, Munya.
Not really. I'm just grateful for being on the panel and listening to Dr. Jones. To be honest, I learned so much. I've got a lot of things going through my head really regarding sports tourism, because it's a field we're trying to really penetrate as soon as we can. And also by doing that, we also help local teams, local schools this side, as they get exposure to play against other schools from different countries different backgrounds, different cultures. So it's something we're really excited about. And the stats, everything that Dr. Jones gave us today, they're really exciting. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Jones, from your side, and then I think we end with Yvonne, and then Rufaro perhaps can get some questions from the audience if there's still any.
Well, I would just like to echo what folks have said, because everyone, I think, has a mental image of their position in the world, but we almost always make it smaller than what it really is. We always think too small. We need to think broader, think broader. I know folks in America, particularly African Americans, we love Africa. We have it as one of our tokens of our own real fantasy of where we come from and how we are resilient, how we overcome so much oppression. But I don't always see folks in Africa recognizing that we need you. You know, African Americans in America need Africans, because you are who we look to, the motherland, the mother country. You know, and so sometimes we get so disheartened when we see some of the things that happen in Africa with the exploitation of your natural resources, of some of the despots who shoot down their own citizens that look like them, you know. So I am always encouraged to bring this message to you, that we are brothers and sisters, and we need you to help us be fulfilled, and we would love to be a part of what you're going through, so we can all join together in unity and find that real brotherhood that I think exists in our own core, that we thrive to have. And I know for my daughters who come to Africa with me, they always, you know, talk about that. And you know, Denise, who's traveled with me to Zimbabwe and to other places in Africa, she's now in a doctoral program at University of Michigan, and she was one of the top recruits to their PhD program. And one of the things that they highlighted was her travel to Africa and her interaction with, because she did a couple of presentations. So there's always value, I believe, in both of the folks in the U.S. and obviously the folks in Africa, how we can bond together to challenge ourselves to not only be better, but to grow ourselves an economic footprint that's worthy of our own, DNA.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Jones. I see Yvonne has dropped out, so I defer back to you, Rufaro.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Fungai. Guys, that there's a lot that you guys have given us that is just, I think there's a lot to soak up, to be fair, and just chew on for the next couple of months so that we get our acts together as Africa. I like how you're saying that we're working from the outside, well, the inside out, basically, because Africa on its own is already the biggest tool that we're working with. And we need to utilize it. I actually think we haven't been utilizing it as much as we need to. So I have one question that came up, and I'm going to read it out. It says, okay, if someone is studying, let's say in terms of sports management, whether it be at your diploma or your master's level, what chances are there for them, especially as a female in this industry? Because obviously it's a very male-dominated industry. So maybe that's more of a question for Dr. Jones. What do you think are the chances? Or shall we say, are they, or maybe we shouldn't even limit it to as a female, because, you are as influential as you believe. But do go on.
Muted. Okay. Thank you very much for that question. I will just give you my first reaction is I am a father of 3 girls, and I'm a grandfather of a daughter. So, I believe girls can do whatever they want. I mean, their ability to achieve success is unlimited, but it has to be outside the box. It has to be in the ability to create, to market, to understand how to build community, how to build social networks. In reality, I've traveled enough to Africa to see that women are really the backbone of a lot of Africa's commerce. The micro businesses that they run I mean, is just unbelievable. It keeps families together. So from my perspective, I believe that if we give them just a little bit of capital, and they can be creative and innovative on how to, for example, I've always thought about women making uniforms, start making all of the equipment that's unique, not the stuff you get from China. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the unique, culturally based apparel that sells. I mean, if anybody who's been in any of these sports, rugby or hockey, the jerseys sell for $200 or $300 a piece. The hats, the things. So the idea of creating a micro business, I think, is where a lot of the value of young females can be in looking at how they can market themselves and build that infrastructure. And virtual marketing, I think, is really, because it takes creativity and it takes a lot of science approach to it. I think that's a real asset. I think that a lot of women bring because of their innovative and creativity and how they manage their own businesses.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can just add on to that from a different perspective, Dr. Jones, if I may, and Rufar, if I may.
Sure.
I think in our industry, this is one of the things that we find very challenging today. We don't have a lot of females participating in sports management. It's something that is inherited naturally from the game itself, where we tend to see, whether it's a female World Cup or football, we tend to see it more from, okay, how can brands position themselves to try and exploit the fact that it's a women event. Yeah. But I want to bring back the sponsorship angle again here. When you look at the global purchasing power of women in let's go back 4 years ago, it was about $30 trillion. And this has gone up since then, I can assure you that. And at the time when this was marked, the first time in history, Sports Illustrated had a woman on the cover. I mean, anybody want to guess who that was? It was Serena Williams. And normally the title would have been Sportsman of the Year, but it was Sportsperson of the Year. So the role of women in sports is getting more and more recognized because not only do they have exactly what Dr. Jones mentioned, but in addition, they have the purchasing power, and from a brand perspective, their relevance in sports has gone just beyond being mere, I don't want to use the term eye candy, but that's how normally this is looked at. When you look at different community initiatives, for example, I've got a colleague of mine whom I work with, and she is the chair of an organization called She Sports here in Switzerland, and she's driving the participation of women in sports across different spectrums, and in particular within the rights holders. When you look at most rights holders today, in particular the ones that we represent as in front, the majority of them are staffed by men in leadership positions, whether it's from FIFA right down to the sponsor organization. So yes, there is a long way to go, but I think once we start looking at the stronger elements, the buying power, the different initiatives that are happening, slowly we'll start seeing more and more women, coming to the fore and taking up those roles. So I just thought I'll add that nugget there. I didn't want to take up so much time.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was an important nugget. Dr. Jones, did you have something to add?
Well, he is absolutely correct. Even in the U.S., when you look at marketing, was almost targeted toward men in most of our major sports until one woman came along and said, wait a minute, women like sports too. No, women like sports too. And now women are more trusted fans because they stay with the team longer. They are brand savvy. If they get a brand, they stick with it. They continue to buy and purchase sports paraphernalia. Like I said, with my daughter, who's a crazy, Steeler fan. Every year, I have to buy her a jersey, for her team. So they buy, they purchase, and they produce. And I think that the panel is absolutely correct, and we shouldn't underestimate their value. What I think, and to answer the question more succinctly, women can be whoever they want to be, whatever they want to be. They just have to be given a little bit of a window of opportunity, a little bit of a capacity, but also just let them go and let them create. that to me is where I think their real value is in the market. Let them be who they are. Just give them some resources and some training and technology access, and they can because they already rule the world in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But whether we want to admit it or not, guys.
We're
Cool,
amazing.
excellent.
Kidding. No, I'm not kidding. Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much. I loved your answers, and I think you're right. I think in general, even when we look at Africa, there are no ceilings. We create them ourselves. So we will be as big as we think and believe that we will be. And I think we have to take on every challenge by the horns and sort of navigate. And I think always, whenever, like, if a door closes, you go through the window. So we need to keep at it, especially in Zimbabwe, regardless of the economic situations and whatever government involvement in or not involved. But I think we have a huge corporate sector that we can sort of deal with, and we've got a huge diaspora as well that we didn't touch on, but I think there could be some serious potential, and also people who are international that would love to, I mean, like that aspect of tourism. So I don't know if Fungai wants to round up anything, but I think I don't see any more comments. I think there's just one comment from Victor. He says, "Thanks, folks. Thoroughly enjoyed and learned a lot." So I'm sure this is going to be really, really important for a lot of people. And I know we were focused on Zimbabwe, and we did a touch on Rwanda and Kenya, but I think this is just pertinent for, like, again, the African continent as a whole. So yeah, I thank you, everybody who's chimed in your time. We really appreciate you, and we definitely have a lot to sit down and start moving on, not just talk about it, but let's start taking action, because now, like what Dr. Jones said, now is the time now. So we need to do that now. Fungai?
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you very much, Dr. Jones. And thank you to all the guys who are watching via different social media channels. And yeah, look, let's connect again next time, another event. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can connect with me. Happy to discuss any other topics raised here. And again, I suppose some of you guys are already on LinkedIn on this panel. So please feel free to contact anybody and connect with them for any further discussions separately.
And I have one last comment. I am leaving my university in the spring, so my time is going to be pretty much my own. And so I really plan to invest more time in this. So if anybody wants to help me be a part of whatever organization you're working with, you want more of my time, I'm happy to be available to do that. I promised my good friend Marasta I'm going to work with him more, and so I'll be coming to Zimbabwe and traveling to Rwanda. So I'm getting back to Kenya as well. So I'm really going to be doing a lot more of this in the future. So thank you again very much, and I appreciate you guys. Hang in there and stay safe. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As well. And, we'll link everything, and everybody who wants to be contacted, we'll put links on our various sites. So stay tuned on Kairos sites. And yeah, have an amazing weekend. Don't drink and drive.
All right.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.